Thank you, Lori, and it's a pleasure to be here tonight. This is the earliest I've been out of the office in weeks based on how much this issue has been in the news, so it's really a pleasure to be here. So I think a pivotal question is, what should a supporter of free markets and private enterprise think about immigration? What should a good policy be? Now, of course, I think the answer to this question is fairly simple and straightforward. Now, legal immigration, whether through a guest worker program or through permanent migration, I think should be a lot easier for most people throughout the world, especially for workers. Now, I think this conclusion is pretty easy and simple to reach. I think it's natural for free marketeers. I think it doesn't really matter what basis you approach it from, whether you're a natural rights based free marketeer, whether you like free markets because of consequentialism or utilitarian arguments, or whether you reach that through ethical intuitionism. I think the answer is all the same. Now, let's just give you a little bit of setup. Of all the markets in the world that have to do with the flows of goods and services across borders or the flow of factors of production, labor is probably the most restrictive of all of them. The labor market is one of the largest and most important in the United States and in the world, not only to our economy, but I think to our moral and ethical health as a nation and individually. Nothing is very much more depressing, I think, than being unemployed, as we know, in this lousy economy. So it's very important for our society. Free marketeers know that deregulating, opening up economies, allowing more competition, allowing free flows, and allowing freedom lead to better results. And this, I think, is the same in labor markets internationally as it is in other markets domestically. So I'm going to approach this issue a little bit from an economist standpoint. That's what my training's in. So let's talk about some of the issues that people are most concerned about. How will immigration affect wages in the United States? How has it in the recent past? Now, there's a lot of papers about this, a lot of details, and basically the answer is not very much. There are 40 million foreign-born Americans right now in the United States. About 13% of the United States is foreign-born. And the big issue is wages for Americans have not decreased very much because of immigrants' impact. The reason is immigrants have different skill sets than the rest of us. They have, a lot of them are very high-skilled on the high end. A lot of them also very low-skilled on the low end. Most Americans are in the middle. This has been the same throughout most of American history. When America had open borders with Europe, you had rapid wage increases over time, combined with massive amounts of immigration, even more so than we are experiencing today. The experience today is that the only group of Americans who plausibly have seen decreases in their wages due to immigration are the group of people who are 25 years or older with less than a high school degree. That's about 12% of the American workforce over the age of 25. I think that there are better things we can do to help these people rather than closing off our labor markets to international flows. Another issue that a lot of people are worried about is crime. We hear about this all the time. Illegal immigrants or unauthorized immigrants committing crime. But immigrants are, on average, far less likely to commit a violent or property crime than native-born Americans. They have an incarceration rate for those types of offenses about 1/4 as high as native-born per capita. Most immigrants who are in prison for immigration violations, period. So when you hear a lot of people talk about that, that's the reason why they're in prison. Now, what you do see is second and third generation immigrants, especially from Hispanic countries, tend on average to have higher rates of crime than other native-born Americans, and then it seems to moderate by the fourth generation. The very optimistic interpretation of this is that they are assimilating. America has, on average, more crime than other developed nations around the world, so in order to assimilate, they reach that standpoint. The exception, of course, are Asian immigrants, who for as many generations as we can measure in the United States have had lower crime rates. I must say also, compared to the Irish immigration in the 19th and early 20th century, Hispanic immigrants are some of the more peaceful ones who have ever come to the United States. Another issue that a lot of people are worried about is assimilation. It's one that I share sometimes. The most important part of assimilation, of course, is language. Now let's take a look at this. Most people, when they're worried about immigration, are worried about Hispanic immigrants. That's the thing, that's a fact when you talk to people. By third generation, Hispanic immigrants are on average as far as we can tell, 100% fluent. That means if your grandparents came here from another country, the odds are, well, take a look at all the data we have, you are 100% likely to be English fluent. Breaking it down, that's 78% English only, 22% bilingual. Something about coming to America makes you lose. I mean, America has been referred to before as a graveyard of foreign languages, and that's happened in the past with every language from Gaelic, which was brought over with some Irish immigrants, to Polish. Now it's in the future, it's going to happen again with Spanish. So if immigration numbers of peaceful and healthy people need to be restricted, I think there's a better way to go about it than the current system. The current system is dominated by quotas, restrictions, arbitrary regulations, inspections, some of them on the books going back over 100 years to the progressive era that don't make much sense in modern society. Instead, I think as free marketeers, we should push for the use of prices to regulate immigration more than anything if we have to regulate it in the first place. And specifically, I propose getting rid of quotas on numbers of immigrants and replacing it with a tariff-based system. Now, a tariff is, as any economist will tell you, much more efficient than a quota-based system. If you want to talk about international trade, almost all economists are ardent free traders, but they will say that quotas do a lot more damage because the quantity of goods and services imported is restricted and doesn't change based on the price. If we allow the quantity to change based on a fixed price, that is much more economically efficient. Trying to argue and have government bureaucrats argue about the specific numbers and the types and the skills of immigrants that need to be allowed in the United States is probably similar to a lot of discussions that Soviet central planners had when they were trying to figure out their Gauss plan for the next year. The information is very old, it's out of date, doesn't work very much. As free marketeers, if we have to support some sort of immigration restriction or some sort of level on the immigration of free and healthy people, I think we should use a tariff to do it. Now, one of the common criticisms of this is that people will be paying to come here. Aren't they, in effect, paying for citizenship? Well, I hate to break it to you, but they're already paying to come here. Illegal immigrants pay on average to come here from Mexico over land $4,000. They pay them to smugglers. To come by sea, Mexicans pay $9,000. From Central America, over $10,000. And for Chinese immigrants coming here illegally, the average is $25,000 to $50,000. And those prices reflect the ability of them to be deported at any time if they're ever captured. So they're definitely willing to pay higher prices to come here in a legal system. That also includes the risk, of course, of being smuggled in illegally, which includes slavery, rape, criminal abuse, and other things. To avoid those types of problems, I think a lot of these immigrants would be willing to pay quite a lot of money for the ability to come here and work, and I think that the government should be able to capture a lot of that money rather than cartels. Through the legal immigration system, let's not ignore the fact that one of the biggest costs is the cost of waiting in line when a line exists for that, trying to pay lawyers and legal fees, fees to the government, bribes, everything else. I think we should replace that entire system with one fee for peaceful and healthy immigrants to come into the United States. Now, good policy is one thing. The more important thing, I think, is figuring out a way for politicians to want to implement that good policy. Now, James Buchanan, the public choice economist who died earlier this month, who passed away, taught us that politicians are interested in their own rational self-interest. They want to do what's good for them. So I think we need to convince, I think more than anybody, the GOP about how to do this. And I think one of the best way to do it is what Marco Rubio said. He said that the GOP needs to become the party of legal immigration. Now, Ann Coulter and Laura Ingraham and a lot of other critics have said you can never outdo the Democrats on immigration. They're always going to go around you. There's a good way to do it. It's supporting legal immigration, an unlimited and large guest worker visa program, increasing the number of green cards for low-skilled, high-skilled, and mid-skilled. That will help do it. If you want to see the labor unions, Democrats, and leftists really freak out, the Republican Party should advocate for massive amounts of legal immigration through guest workers. That will really put the Democrats in a big bind because they will do a lot to harm their coalitions going forward. We saw that in 2007 when Senator Dorgan of North Dakota introduced an amendment to kill the guest worker program, which killed that immigration reform effort. The unions were 100% behind it. The unions are behind it right now, trying to prevent a low-skilled guest worker program from being implemented or put into a final bill. If you really want to become the party of legal immigration, I suggest that the Republican Party actually do it and go around the Democrats, and that's a successful strategy. Thank you.